It's been a great honor to present this rare case where the child, where the life, our businesses in Aster is all about saving life, and this child where it's been cured from a very rare congenital disorder, immune disorder called LAD, and a 5-month-old child who's hardly weighing 5 kg. Our great heroes, that is our doctors who have done a wonderful clinical work. I mean, that is something amazing. I mean, this is a miracle. I wouldn't say miracle, but for the good work also, the clinical work, what our clinicians have done, especially led by Dr. Anu, Dr. Raghuram, Dr. Sagar Bhattan, and of course, Dr. Stalin. So they have done a wonderful job in giving another life to this child. So they will take you through the entire details of how the child was treated and what kind of treatment, what about difficulties they have undergone to bring this life back.
This particular bone marrow transplantation, it is more than the rarity of the disease, because there are centers in India which will be doing bone marrow transplant for even rare conditions. The fact is that this child was a very challenging case. So generally, we have all worked in centers abroad. Generally, we have certain benchmarks for doing or taking a bone marrow transplantation patient. So extremes of age is a challenge. So if you do it above 50 years of age or say less than 2 years of age, the complications are more, chance of death is more. So most of the centers, even in Western centers we have worked, if it is an elective transplant, then the experts would usually wait for the baby to cross the first birthday and gain at least about 10 kg of weight so that the transplant will be slightly smoother. And definitely all of us would want a patient who is free of active infection, because the most common cause of death in a bone marrow transplant setting is infection. So if you are going with infection on board, then you are asking for more trouble. In this patient, the baby was 5 months old, less than 5 kgs, and the baby was never free of infection. Always the baby was on antibiotics, and in fact we took the baby to bone marrow transplantation with antibiotics on board. So it is like batting on our back foot. And in spite of that, we all decided that this is the best chance for the baby to survive.
Unfortunately, a few babies are born without efficient army, and that is what we call immune deficiency. And this baby actually had a very rare immune deficiency called LAD, or Leukocyte Adhesion Deficiency. To give you a figure, it is like 1 in 1 million. So that is the rarity of this disease. But because of, I would say, close marriages in our societies, sometimes we do get genetic diseases like this. And unfortunately, this family had lost the first child at a very young age. And when this girl was born, they were again worried whether this baby also has the same disease. So this baby, right from the first month, started developing infections. Pretty much for the first 4 months, the child was almost always in the hospital taking IV antibiotics. So finally, when the baby was referred, we did some specialized blood tests which are available in the hospital, and we diagnosed this condition. And the moment we diagnosed this condition, we knew the only way this baby can survive is with a bone marrow transplant.
Fortunately, in our case, in this patient, she was referred early, and Dr. Sagar managed to make the diagnosis. So once the diagnosis was made, then we were waiting for a window of opportunity to do the transplant, because bone marrow transplant is a situation where we have to give strong medicines to remove the patient's own immune system and their bone marrow before we give the donor's cells. If the child is already having an infection, that infection is definitely going to flare up during the procedure. So when Dr. Sagar was asking about this procedure, we kept telling, let us have a window, so at least a 2-week window where the child will be without antibiotics, and we were waiting for that window. It never happened. Every time when we say, okay, we'll wait for 3-4 days, the child goes home, within 4th-5th day, child will develop another infection and will get admitted. So there was no opportunity, so we had to proceed with the transplant, taking the higher risk. These infections can flare up. And also another problem is, whenever a child gets repeated infections and repeated antibiotics, all the bacteria in their body becomes resistant. So then whenever the infection flares up during the transplant, you will develop a very resistant bacterial infection which we have to tackle. The 2-week period immediately after the transplant is a very, very critical period. Fortunately, we were able to manage all those complications quite well, and finally you can see that the child is out of the danger zone. Still there is some more time to go, but the child is, I'm pleased to report that the child is doing very well.
And so we had to take up the transplant because this child had no immunity. The child could not overcome the infection, and the only way we could treat the infection was to give the child immunity. So we had to do the bone marrow transplant even though we did not get an ideal time where the child was free of infection. So in that type of situation, it's a high risk transplant, and we had to look for the donor, and luckily the mother was a full match to the child. So we were very lucky in that the mother could donate her bone marrow for us to give to the child. So what we had done was we had taken a high risk concern because of the infection, and then we took the bone marrow from the mother, and after giving sufficient medications to remove the bone marrow of the child, we had given mother's bone marrow to the child, and then it will take about 2 to 3 weeks for the immunity and the mother's cells to grow in the child and start working. And luckily during this time, unfortunately she had, as we told, because of repeated antibiotics, there was a resistant bug, and then once the child's immunity came back from the mother's immunity started developing in the child, we were able to overcome the infection and save the child.
Yes, my name is Dr. Anup. I am consultant hematologist and bone marrow transplant physician at Aster Hospital. I have my colleague Dr. C.P. Raghuram, senior consultant pediatric hemato-oncologist and transplant physician. And we have two more colleagues who are here today, Dr. Stalin and Dr. Sagar, all from Aster CMI Hospital. So this baby was just 5 months old when we decided to take this baby up for a very challenging procedure called allogenic bone marrow transplantation. This type of procedure can be done in this age group, but usually clinicians will prefer the baby to be slightly older, slightly weighing more, if possible around 10 kg. This baby was just around 5 kg and had active infection. But this baby had a condition which would not have let her survive without this bone marrow transplantation. So after counseling the family that even during the transplant infections and risk of death is very high, we have gone ahead with the procedure because that was the only life-saving procedure. It was quite challenging. I would take this opportunity to thank all our nurses for their excellent supportive care, and without which we could not have done this. Dr. Raghuram is here. He will elaborate on a few aspects of the treatment.
Okay. I am Dr. Raghuram. I am a pediatric hemato-oncologist and BMT physician at Aster Hospital. This was a challenging case in that this child was only 5 months old, and the child has been having infections right almost from birth, and child has, in the first 4 months of life, the child had spent most of the time in the hospital because of the infection. And this child was picked up to have immunodeficiency. That means the child had reduced immunity because of a condition called Leukocyte Adhesion Deficiency, what short form is LAD. Because of this, the child had repeated infections, and they were so repeated that one was merging into the another. And we were not getting a time without an infection to go ahead with the transplant, so we took up the child with active infection. So it was a challenging transplant, and luckily the mother was a fully matched donor, so we could take the hematopoietic stem cells, that is called the bone marrow, from the mother, and we given it to the child, and it has started working well, and the child has overcome this resistant bug, and child is now free of infection and is growing well.